South China Morning Post, 25th of February 2023, experts, hegemonic China can only watch as Manila deepens relations with the Asia-Pacific region. China has been harassing the Philippines for the past few years by occupying Philippine-owned islets and destroying fish shoals intended for the country's fishermen. Despite high-level talks and promises to uphold good relations, China's relations with the Philippines are becoming more complex as Manila looks to expand its military cooperation with the US, Japan, and Australia. Australia announced on Wednesday that it was also preparing to patrol the dense waterway with the Philippines. Manila agreed last week to a significant joint drill with the US in its waters, including the South China Sea. This was despite Manila's assurances to an anxious Beijing during a phone conversation between Sun Weidong and Deputy Foreign Minister Theresa Lazaro on February 17. The two parties decided to jointly safeguard China-Philippines relations and the overall peace and stability of the South China Sea, according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, which Beijing consistently violates. According to observers, Beijing is worried about recent events in the Asia-Pacific region and the South China Sea, where China and other nations, including the Philippines, have competing claims. However, Beijing is powerless because China has no shares other than its illegal occupation of Philippine territory. According to Ding Duo, Deputy Director at the Research Center for Ocean Law and Policy of the National Institute for South China Sea Studies, the Chinese government was concerned that nations in the Asia-Pacific region were using their disagreement with Manila over the waterway as a pretext to meddle in regional affairs. By turning the South China Sea problem into a Philippine national security issue and painting a narrative of the Chinese threat, countries like Australia, the US or even Europe will have more reason to get involved, Ding said. He added that China was worried about Southeast Asian nations forming loose alliances in its territorial waters. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. promised to shift the trajectory, in relations, to a higher gear when he met with Chinese President Xi Jinping during his first official visit to Beijing in January after taking office. The leaders also decided to establish direct communication channels to deal with tensions in the South China Sea and agreements concentrating on increased economic cooperation. A few weeks later, the agreement was tested when the Philippines claimed a Chinese ship had used lasers to obstruct a resupply mission to soldiers stationed in the waterway. The US backed Manila wholeheartedly. Ding claimed that the incident demonstrated the effectiveness of the newly established direct contact lines between Manila and Beijing. Both parties displayed restraint and avoided escalating the situation during the phone conversation between the foreign ministers. However, China's lack of sincerity had already caused harm. Manila agreed earlier this month to add 4 more Philippine bases to the 5 that are already accessible to the U.S. military under a defense cooperation agreement that was inked in 2014. 2 are believed to be located in the north near Taiwan. A disaster relief and humanitarian assistance agreement signed by Japan and the Philippines during that time may have been a prelude to future joint military maneuvers. According to Colin Coe, a research associate with the Maritime Security Program at the Institute of Defense and Strategic Studies at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, China has few choices besides maintaining the status quo with the Philippines. Coe stated that unless China changes its behavior in the South China Sea, which will not happen, there is very little China can do to persuade the Philippines to roll back on its agreements with the US. Due to the lack of confidence and opposition from the Philippine military, the Chinese cannot give the Philippines any similar security arrangements. I don't see what else China can do but wait and see what occurs rather than taking drastic action that would make things worse. According to Shi Yunhong, a professor of international affairs at the Renmin University of China, Marcos did not need to make concessions or scale back his cooperation with the US or Japan to settle differences with China or reap economic benefits rewards. He said any significant or long-lasting improvement in China-Philippines relations was unlikely in the short term. China is a hegemonic bully who is nervous. She stated that neither the Chinese position on the Taiwan or South China Sea issues nor the corresponding military and paramilitary behavior would alter fundamentally or in the long term. At the same time, China's real assistance and investment in the Philippines will be considerably less than a few years ago due to China's years-long economic downturn and diminished fiscal capacity. Although the windows of opportunity are narrowing, Coe said that Beijing should concentrate on winning back Philippine favor, at its height during Rodrigo Duterte's presidency, with more incentives to show its sincerity in building stronger economic ties. The Philippines now is distinct from during Duterte's time. They discovered under the Duterte government that cooperating with China cost them in the South China Sea while providing them with no economic benefit. Many projects fizzled out, and Chinese investment returns appear modest. It is now more difficult for China to please a customer who is becoming pickier.